I want to talk to you about something today. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they said that they were getting a lot of heat for being a Fiero fan or owning a Fiero. I mean, they're being trashed because they owned a particular car. So I want to talk to you about 10 reasons why people hate the Pontiac Fiero. Number one, it's just not their brand. Okay, everybody's got their brand. When I was a kid, I had a thing about Matchbox versus Hot Wheels. I like Matchbox because I like the realism that they brought to cars. I mean, you saw a Corvette, it looked like a Corvette. Hot Wheels was more modified and customized and kind of dream vehicles. So I would have fallen on the Matchbox side of things. But there are people that still act that way about their brand. They might be a Ford guy, they might be a Chevy guy, they might be a Mopar or no car guy. Okay, well, I can understand why you wouldn't want to buy into a car manufacturer that doesn't even exist anymore. But there's no reason to trash somebody else because they own a particular vehicle. Okay, appreciate it for what it is. It's a car from the 80s. It may not be your cup of tea, but that doesn't mean you have to trash what somebody else has. So that's the first reason. It's just not their brand. Why else wouldn't a person like a Pontiac Fiero? Well, a common complaint is they have no power steering. What I say to people that, complain about that is, well, this guy doesn't complain about no power steering. But not everybody has the forearms the size of Popeye either. So my best recommendation is get moving. The faster you move in a Fiero, the better the steering reacts. Sure, you can't do a tight U-turn in the middle of a neighborhood. But then, do you really want people doing U-turns in your neighborhood? I don't. So, hey, it is what it is. Grab the wheel. You're going to have to turn the wheel. There's no assist. You get to work out while you're driving. Why is that so bad? On the subject of no power steering, I have a friend that actually likes no power steering. He tells me it gives you the real feel of the road. You feel every bump, you feel every turn, you get to react with the car. You're more one with the car when you have a non-power steering car like the Fiero than you are with an assist car. I mean, to me that's kind of, a grandma car is one that floats down the road and you really can't feel the road. A Fiero, man, you can react with that wheel. So try it, you might like it. Another reason people hate the Pontiac Fiero is they say it's too small. Well, sure, when you look at it compared to SUVs nowadays, it looks pretty small. But it's kind of like the TARDIS. Once you open that door up and you get in, you realize it's a lot roomier than it looks on the outside. It's very deceiving. I mean, I'm 6 foot tall. I'm more than 2 spins on the wheel. But I still fit in that car just fine. There's plenty of legroom, especially on the passenger side. There's no motor in the front to pin your legs back. You can stretch your legs fully forward in that passenger seat. There's just as much room in there as there is a Corvette. Another common complaint I get is they're hard to work on. That mid-engine, they just squeeze those engines right into the back of the Fiero, and you really can't get in there and work on it. Well, I agree that the V6 model, to get your hands in the back and change those spark plugs, it's kind of tight. But I step into the trunk, and I'm able to get to anything in that engine I want to get from the top. Or maybe you have to crawl underneath. But listen, it's all OBD1. It's not a complicated system. Okay, either it's working or not. A sensor goes bad, you replace the sensor. It takes about 5 or 10 minutes. It's really not that difficult to work on, especially considering today's motors are all computerized. And the whole engine bay is taken up. You look inside an Iron Duke engine, you got more than enough room to tinker around in there. So they're really not hard to work on. To change the engine, you actually lift the body off of the engine cradle. And then you pull the engine out, put a new engine in, really not that difficult to work on. On the topic of hating Pontiac Fieros, you'll eventually get to the transmissions. It's 1984. You got two options. You got a 4-speed manual or you got a 3-speed transmission. That's what they came with. Yes, I know. When you're driving at highway speeds and you've got 4 gears to work with, that engine sounds like it's just screaming for another gear. Well, it is. It was 1984. But by 1986, they came out with the 5-speed. Okay? And really, that 3-speed automatic, when you have an Iron Duke, that's just about as fast as you want to go in that car. Okay? So don't you worry about the transmissions. I've seen people put in a 6-speed transmission. To me, that transmission problem is just someone complaining. It's not really a problem. Hey, here's another common complaint you get about the Pontiac Fiero, especially if you watch Fiero videos on YouTube. Boxy interior, boxy interior, boxy interior. Well, it was the 80s, folks. They had boxy interior. Now, to me, it looks fine the way it is. I know some people have taken a 2000s Grand Prix and swapped out the dash. If you want that nice curvy dash, then you can install that in your Pontiac Fiero and there won't be a problem. But you know what? The thing about the curvy dash, one day that will be out of style and they'll go on to something else, maybe even a boxy interior. And consider this, when you look at an 80s car, you want it to look like an 80s car. When you're looking at a 57 Chevy, you want to see a chromed out dash. You don't want to see some kind of bubble creation from another era, from another time period. When I'm looking at a 57 Chevy, I want the dash to look like a 57 Chevy. When I'm looking at an 87 Fiero, I want it to look like an 87 Fiero. So boxy, it's just a personal preference. Hey, here's a common knock on the Fiero. GM just dove into the parts bin and pulled out a Chevette suspension for the front and a Citation suspension from the rear and threw it in this car. Two of the junkiest cars that GM ever made. Well, they also used those in the Buick Opal by Isuzu. They also used that same suspension in some race cars. Before you throw that out there, do your research and see what that suspension was actually used for. So it wasn't just a Chevette. It wasn't just a Citation. It was used around the world in many different applications. Anyway, I've seen many upgrades online. If you go to the Fiero store, you can upgrade your suspension. You can put a sway bar in the back. You can do some other mods, poly bushings, and you can make those upgrades work for you. And guess what? Parts bin suspension means there's plenty of parts available. If they use those parts in many different applications and you go into your parts store or you go into your local junkyard, guess what you can find? Parts for your Fiero. So parts are readily available because of parts bin suspension. Okay, so if you've ever owned a Fiero or ever known anybody that's had a Fiero, you know that one of the knocks on the Fiero is that it's underpowered. Now granted, when they were designing the Fiero, they wanted it to be a true sports car. But they were held back by GM. And so they put the Iron Duke engine in the Fiero. Was that a mistake? That's what they had the money for back in the day. And so yes, they put a 4-cylinder Iron Duke engine that had 92 horsepower. Is it underpowered? It is what it is. It's a small engine in a small car. But you know what that got you? That got you 40 miles per gallon. So you could go a long way during those times when the gas prices were extremely high and they had just gone through the 70s with the gas lines and the gas shortages, the gas wars. Well, here's a car that's getting 40 miles per gallon. It's what people wanted back then. But then in '85, you got an upgrade to the 2.8 V6. I had one of those. I know it's only 140 horsepower, but it's very quick off the line. Now you say, well, 140 horsepower, my Toyota Tercel does that. Okay, well, take that engine out. You got many options. You got a 3.1, you got the 3.4, you got the 3800 NA, you got the 3800 SC supercharged. You can also take that out and put an LS motor in it. You can also take it out and put the North Star in it. You've got very many options for speed. If that's what you're into, just take the motor out and put a new one in. Like I said, it's just a matter of lifting the body off the engine cradle, putting your new engine in, putting it back, and away you go. Okay, you knew it was coming. Eventually, if you talk about a Fiero long enough, if you talk about the Fiero to one person in the world, that one person is going to say something about fires. All right, enough with the fire talk, okay? They didn't make a car to catch on fire and name it the Fiero because it caught on fire. That just doesn't make any sense. There are a couple reasons why those 84s, and pretty much only the 84s, caught on fire. Number one, they used a 3.5 quart oil pan in a car that needed 4 quarts. That caused problems because people were driving with 3.5 quarts and then they would let it go low. Well, then you're running on 3 quarts. What do you think is going to happen to your engine? It looks like a sports car, so they're driving them like a sports car. So guess what? You take a car that wasn't designed to be beat on, and you beat on it, guess what? You're going to have troubles. Also, they put heat shielding in after 84 to solve the problem of the fires. Also, you may not know this, but one of the sources of the fire is not doing routine maintenance and cleaning out your heater system. The heater resistor in the front of the car, not in the rear of the car, but in the front, needs to be cleaned out once or twice a year, or else you're going to have a buildup of pollen and debris, and that's going to spark against your heater resistor and cause a fire. But basically, if you maintain your Fiero, it will not catch on fire. Do you know that there was more Ford Explorers that caught on fire? They didn't call it an Explorer because it exploded, and they didn't call it a Fiero because it caught on fire. Now, the last reason that I can think of that people hate the Pontiac Fiero is because they've never driven one. If you've ever gotten in one and take some sharp curves or drive in traffic and have people look at you and have people stop you at the gas station and talk to you about yours, and you know what they always say to me? Boy, I always wanted one of those. But you get a group of car guys together and they're going to start bashing on the Fiero. What I say to those guys is drive one. Drive one that's been swapped with a 3800 in it. Drive one who's had the front end redone and updated and upgraded the suspension from the 80s. And you will appreciate that car. That car is quick, that car is nimble, that car turns heads. And that's why the Fiero guys love them so much.
Man, I hate this. This car has no cup holders whatsoever. My drink's not just going to sit there on the console. Wait a minute. There we go. Who says the Fiero doesn't have cup holders?